Generation Desperation, how I made and lost $1 million, wealth, poverty, and what it means to lead a good life. This is being described as a must-read story for fans of the trading game and the psychology of money. It is by Alexander Hurst. It charts the rise, fall, and rise again of this young man. I'd like to say joining me live on the line is Alexander himself. Good morning to you, sir.
Good morning, Giles. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure's all mine. Where did we find you this morning? Whereabouts are you?
Well, I'm in my flat in Paris, and it's actually sunny, so, that's a nice change from lately.
So, the book sort of the book is a sort of a rags to riches and then rags again story. Just give me the 101, if you could, then, about how what you were doing in Paris and what your situation was in, was it 2007?
No. So this all started around the time that COVID started in 2020. So I was, a freelance journalist, just a couple of years out of grad school, sort of making it month to month, but with no real sort of sense of stability when I looked out into the future. And, I come from a relatively modest family in the US, and I was worried about my parents' retirement. And I saw online that all these people seem to be making a lot of money trading stocks. And I sort of had this thought to myself, well, if they can do it, why not me? And so I got, embroiled in this long and winding road of taking out a loan from my bank for a few €1,000, starting to trade it, falling in with the Reddit trading crowd. At the same time, observing my behavior, thinking, well, I'm a writer. Maybe I can write about this phenomenon that I'm observing on Reddit, which seems to be a millennial desperation capitalism. All these people who've decided collectively that there is no stability to be had in a traditional sort of sense. And so what do? You YOLO into the market. You play capitalism to the max to try and leave the system entirely. And over the next 11 months, I went from, about 12,000 borrowed euros to over $1.2 million. The scariest part of it was telling my anti-capitalist, very Marxist Catholic parents back in Cleveland, Ohio, in the United States, that I was now rich, and worrying extremely that they would judge me for it. And then psychologically, you sort of go a little bit insane. And when I started, no bubble lasts forever.
Yeah.
And when I started losing, then I became obsessed with the idea of getting my money back. And so I spent the next year and a half chasing my losses all the way down to zero, totally obsessed with the idea of getting back what I had and never looking at what was still there and taking it and deciding to do something safer and more responsible with it.
Just a couple of things off the back of that. I mean, there's a brilliant book called Liar's Poker, which came out which is talking about the original sort of, when we're talking Wall Street back in 87. It was a huge sort of about the excesses. And of course, everybody go, oh, Wolf of Wall Street. It can be quite, I like the way you say getting my money back, because when you go from living in a flat share in Paris to 1.2 million over a short period of time, does the chasing the money become where do you put your sort of, and your parents are these sort of Catholic Marxists over in the States, your own worth? Because suddenly a lot of people do this and go, they're chasing the money for the money's sake, and suddenly everything else can go out the window because you're chasing the large wodge of cash, basically, Alex.
Exactly. Look, when I started trading, what I wanted was a pot of money that would let me just sort of be a writer.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to make any money writing. Can I write novels for the rest of my life? All of my friends who I was looking at from university, everybody doing some sort of art seemed to have family money or this big safety net to fall back on. So I said, let me create that for myself. Yeah. And then the deep irony is that I became totally consumed with the idea of more and more money, that I wasn't even doing the thing anymore that I initially wanted the money to free me up to do. And psychologically, what I observed happening in myself is that a dollar was no longer a dollar. It was potentially 4, 5, 10 in the future. And so my zero level reset at every moment. Initially, I wanted $10,000, and I thought that would really change my life. I would be able to go visit my friends in California who I hadn't seen since our graduation from undergrad. And then at 10,000, I wanted 100,000, and that was a down payment on an apartment, and that would really change my life. And at 100,000, it was I could really have $1 million, and that would be a different universe. And at $1 million, it was but with 2.5 million, I could help my parents retire. I could have my flat. I could keep money in the market. I could become a rentier. I could draw 4% per year. And I think that, especially as we're living in an age where we see people with really obscene amounts of wealth that are totally obsessed with doing everything they can to capture the political system and ensure that they're never subjected to any types of regulations, that they have more and more and more and more. And, I was looking at this interesting data the other day of, the sort of the top 10 US billionaires and their charitable giving. And it's minuscule. It's as if you or me were to, throw somebody 20 cents.
Yeah.
The amount of money that Elon Musk has ever given to charity is like absolutely no. And I think that I touched very briefly the brain damage that comes with having huge amounts of money. And, $1.2 million, we can talk about in a short compressed amount of time. That is quite a lot. And at 30, that was quite a lot. Is it enough actually to live a sustainable life in an economy where housing prices have totally gone off the rails? We could talk about that. But I think what happens in this to your psychology is you do get obsessed with the idea of, but in the future, it could be 3 to 4 times that. So why would I ever pull out today what could be, so much more down the road? You were teetering on the thing of addiction here, gambling addiction. One's not enough, but two, how much is too much? But also, I like the justification. I'll get 10,000 and then I'll go off and I'll write the novel. I'll get 100,000. I'll go off to California. There's always going to be a sort of that's my moral purpose. I'm not just getting the money for the money. I'm getting the money because I want to do something with it. And of course, as it shifts. Mm-hmm. You kind of lose. Well, okay. Well, maybe I'll do something. I'll do something worthy. But in the meantime, I could double this money. I mean, it's a really interesting take on the human condition, isn't it? Right. And there's this moment where COVID restrictions get kind of lifted when the vaccine happens in the US, and I was able to go back and see my parents who I hadn't seen in, over a year and a half. And they both, work in deep social work. And my dad had spent a lot of time working with the homeless. And so he needed a new van. This, he was the pastor of this church that was mainly homeless guys, and their van was falling apart. And I thought to myself, well, $25,000, I could just write a check for that. That's like nothing. Because at the time, I had 1.2 million invested. I had another $1 million in margin loan that I had taken out from my broker. That was all. And, one calls and call options on one single solar stock. It was absolutely, not bright, not responsible, not wise what I was doing. And I thought to myself, I could just get him a new van. And the idea that took over was, but why would I do that when I could come back in 6 to 8 months and give him $250,000 with this $25,000? And I guarantee you that 6 to 8 months from then, I would have thought, why would I do this when I could come back and give him $1 million and that would change everything for them? And so it never ends, the cycle. Did
you find your own sort of view of people changing when you suddenly come to this money? Because presumably, if you've got 1 point whatever, have you moved out of the flat share? Are you living
no.
Are you doing? Right. Okay.
I didn't move out of the flat share.
Okay. Yeah.
I didn't spend any of it on myself because I was trapped in what I just described to you, right? Yeah. Why would I take 10,000 euros and go on vacation when it's 100,000? I didn't even pull the money that I knew I would need to use to pay taxes on some realized gains in one fiscal year. Thought I could outrun the tax man by continuing to invest that money in the subsequent fiscal year before I ever needed to, actually send it off. And so I ended up with this giant tax bill on totally phantom, non-existent gains.
So how? Because because normally there would be this, we'd have this arc, and then you'd get a lot of money, and then you'd get the Lamborghini, and you'd get the apartment in the whatever, and the high rent whatever. But yours is sort of an existential one, as it really isn't, because you've got this, you just. Is it the rush? Is it the attract? Is it the attraction is basically, I can double this, I can treble this, and keep going until suddenly you can't.
Yeah, more or less.
So what? Yeah. So when it all sort of falls apart, how quickly does the desperation come in then? how does the fall come, and how quickly does it come, and were there any indicators?
Yeah, so I would use that word desperation to describe what fueled me even getting into the market, and then also my behavior once I was losing money. But it didn't. I think what's If it had been a casino, I probably would have pulled my gains off the table and left. I would have thought, wow, I had this amazing spike. I was ace at poker tonight, or blackjack was really my thing. The house is always going to win. I'm going to take it and go. But because what I had done was 11 months of consistently progressing upwards, when you have a few bad days, you don't think, wow, the casino's, the night of the casino is done. I'm going to take it and leave. You think, okay, but I was doing this for 11 months, so I can clearly, keep going in that long trend of what's been happening. And so it was a slow spiral of 18 months that it took to lose everything. I have an initial knock where I lose $500,000 in a day. Which, at the end of this, nobody
The way
died.
that you casually say that, the way that you casually, you had a bit of a knock, and I mean, did you not? Were the alarm bells going clang, clang, clang on the back of your head, Alexander? I mean, come on.
They were. And actually, my broker sent me this letter that I quote in the book, which is kind of the stock brokerage firm saying, dude, are you okay? Or it's like going through, like, you've made all these trades, you've lost this amount, you spent this much on commissions. Write back and confirm to us that you are aware of this, or we're going to cut off your access to options. Options are, this financial product that combines leverage and risk, and they're extremely volatile, and you can lose everything quite quickly. And they're also timed because they have an expiration date. And I read this, I take note of it, and I think to myself, yeah, but I've gotten here to begin with from nothing. I can clearly keep doing this and keep going, and I'll hit my, my magic number, and then I'll diversify and I'll cash out and I'll do safe things, which is what I told myself on the way to $1 million. And I had written down, all the safe things that I was going to diversify into at $1 million, and totally, swiped that paper off my desk when I hit that number. And so it took about 18 months, and it dwindled down to zero. It's, you're in a type of psychosis. When I had $250,000, $300,000, I was going to see a psychologist, convinced that I had ruined this incredible chance that had just, been served up to me on a silver platter, and lying to him about how much I still had left, because I didn't want to face the judgment that I was putting all of this money onto one Hail Mary, as the American English expression says, into this one Hail Mary play on a biotech to have, 10x or nothing within a year when their phase 2 clinical trial results came out. And so, it's absolutely wild that you tell yourself that there's nothing left, when in fact there's a huge amount that's still life-changing that's left. But that's part of the psychology of what happens.
How much time of your day were you? Are you just hunched in front of a screen? I'm presuming you're at a screen.
At the time, yeah. And the fact that the world was locked down, and that there was, in France, it was particularly intense, the lockdowns, right? I don't know if everybody was aware of this, but we had these self-authorization forms where you kind of said, I authorize myself to leave my home for 1 hour and up to 1 kilometer of distance to go grocery shopping, blah, 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 blah. But it was quite strict when lockdown happened in France. And so there was really nothing to do. I'm shut in this, I wasn't the most miserable of the desperate. And I think that's something that characterizes the millions of people who found each other on Reddit and pursued trading, right? Like, we're not talking about people who are so destitute that they're, living on the street or about to live on the street. We're talking about a generation of people, millennials and Z, who just no longer see any type of mobility, income progression, stability, the general markers, that were associated with financial success and your ability to have a family and live a somewhat predictable life, gone. And so those people are trading a lot of money. But I was in this flat where, we had an ant infestation in the bathroom, and it was, really small and cramped, and there was no common room. There was just our two bedrooms, the bathroom, the kitchen space, which was quite dated. And so I'm shut in there, all day long with my flatmate, listening to her take her work calls through the very thin wall that separates our 2 bedrooms. And what was there to do? There was Wall Street bets on Reddit. And so I was just spending hours and hours and hours obsessed with the next trade, the trade after that. And it totally changed my relationships with my friends who remarked to me, you kind of sound like a finance bro. Your mood seems to be, a subsidiary of whatever the market did that day. It really wrecked with my romantic relationships at the time too. Just the amount of attention that I was not devoting to a person who deserved it, but was giving to my screen because, what if my portfolio fluctuated $3,000 in the past minute?
Yeah, but the other thing is, of course, you can justify this because you are building the wealth so you'll be able to one day enjoy the life you want. And an interesting thing about this whole thing with millennials and Gen Z is because I did an article in my other job about Gen Z and the fact and the millennials and the fact that I'm Generation X, so I'm at the tail end of you had a job for life. You knew where you were going to, cradle to grave sort of thing. You didn't change career. You became a journalist at 18 or 21 and you stayed a journalist. You went to work for paper and you retired at 65. That's out of the water now. And getting onto the property ladder as well, unless you've got the bank of mum and dad to a lot of extent, that's gone as well for a lot of Gen Z stroke millennials. So there is that sort of that uncertainty and the fact that, you need to get cash. You need to have that cash to have that quote unquote lifestyle.
Yeah. And, I lived this anecdotally, and then quite recently it's been corroborated with some interesting research. So there are two researchers at University of Chicago and Northwestern who in November came out with a paper where they were looking at the correlation between the perception of the total inaccessibility of housing, ability to buy a flat, a home, whatever, and how that was correlated to a huge degree of acceptance of financial risk today, mainly among millennials and Gen Z. And then, the Financial Times in December had a piece where they broke down some data looking at mainly London, but this is applicable in sort of every large city in Western Europe and the United States. Just that affordable housing has been almost totally eliminated. And for London, it was in 2000, about a third of the housing stock required 3x your monthly income, and another 25% required 4x. And, there was maybe 25% that was above 5x your monthly income. And today it's only 5x your monthly income and above.
Yeah. Yeah, enough said. So did you ever wake up one morning and then it was flashing zero? Was that the moment of clarity as it was, Alex?
Yes. And like I said, I had thrown, $250,000 into this biotech company thinking, 10x or nothing a year from now. And the day that it went nothing, not 10x, the day that it went nothing, I was actually on a date at the Aquarium of Paris, having a fantastic time, being sort of like a child, giggling on the weird looking bulgy eyed fish, with this woman who was really fun and very funny and quite cool. And then I went to the bathroom to check my portfolio and saw that it was all zero. And I had this odd wave of calm, like this is all over. I don't have to be obsessed with this anymore. I don't have to have this additional anxiety of what is my portfolio going to do? Am I ever going to come back hanging over my head? And so I distinctly remember just walking out of the bathroom, continuing the rest of the date, having fun, getting bubble tea afterwards, shooting those, like boba out of the straws at each other in a park and feeling kind of okay. And then the anxiety hit. 48 hours later of, oh my God, what am I going to do to pay this impending tax bill on these gains that no longer exist? And what am I going to do now to get back on track with the rest of my life? But it was the beginning of that realization that, okay, this manic detour is over. And what is there to come back to afterwards?
Manic detour is over. If this was a Hollywood movie, this would have taught you valuable life lessons and what's really important, etc., 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 as you sort of walk off into the sunset hand in hand with the bubble-eyed fish. But so what? Is there? What inspired you to write Generation Desperation? Is it a call to say, look, there are a lot of people who are getting involved in this sort of world because they think that they need to make this amount of money for happiness. Is it your own story? What's if you like the unique selling point then?
Yeah. So just, a month or two after I started doing all this trading, I thought to myself, wow, what's happening here on Wall Street Bets could make an interesting long form piece for a magazine. And I sort of had this idea to myself, desperation capitalism. And I Googled that and the term didn't really exist. And I guess the researcher at Oxford actually sort of credited me with creating the term desperation capitalism in a research paper later on. And so when all this was over, I sort of went back to, the therapist even, he said, this would make for a good piece. He used to be a magazine editor, the therapist that I was seeing. And he said, you should write about this. And so finally, at some point, I was ready to write about it. And it is sort of an artifact of a very manic period in my life, but also a manic period in the world. And I thought, this is cathartic for me, but it's also potentially cathartic for a lot of people in my generation to just sort of have this set of circumstances that we've been confronted with seen. And I've had a lot of people who hear the story who either initially read this essay I wrote for The Guardian, that sort of was the birthing point of the book, or who have read the book in the past, week or two, who have messaged me saying, I do feel seen. I've been going through something like this. I got wrapped up in trading. I felt like I was losing myself. Now I can sort of turn around and get back to the things that actually matter to me. That's incredible when that happens. But it was writing. It was also a chance to sort of excise this, close it, put ink and a period on it, and then move on to the next set of things that I want to write. Because when I was trading, I wasn't writing, and once the trading was back, this deep passion to write actually flooded back. So.
Do you ever think, I could just go on for maybe just a couple of days and just, throw the advance I got for the book, put the, couple of grand and on, I don't know, on aquarium fish stocks or something like that and see what happens.
I think about that every time I walk down my street and I see this gorgeous rooftop apartment with this rooftop terrace and these trees that are sort of spilling over the top of it. And I think, man, I could have had that place.
Yes, but would you be happy? Because then you'd look across and you'd see somebody else's with a bigger terrace and you'd go, you know what? I'd really like that one as well.
Probably.
The book is called Generation Desperation, How I Made and Lost $1 Million. It's by Alexander Hurst, who we're talking to today. Alexander, if we want to follow you and say nice things to you online, is there social media presence? Do you have a website? Where can people find you?
Yes, definitely. You can find me on Instagram at I am Hurst, Hurst. And if there's anybody out there who has a similar story, feel free to shoot me your experience, shoot me your message.
I'm sure there's lots of people involved in property in the boom in Spain who probably have a very much a similar story. This book is called Generation Desperation, How I Made and Lost $1 Million. Listeners, you can order it via our own virtual bookstore. Click on the front page of the book, which is the cover of the book, which is currently in the virtual bookstore and to be winging its way to you. The book is called Generation Desperation. It's by Alexander Hurst. Alexander, it's been absolutely brilliant to speak to you this morning. Thanks for your time.
Thanks so much, Giles. It was fun.